It's Tuesday night, and this is Divots and Pivots.
I am Andrew.
That's what I love.
Mr. Mallard. Join me as always, Mr. Chief of Morale himself, Bud Copeland. Bud, how are you this evening before we get
So the point being is, good golfers are a fucking dime a dozen, and we saw it in full swing that the line of demarcation between.
here? Are you ready, Bud? Are you ready for the players? Are you ready to make money? Are you ready to try to beat me?
I didn't do my homework this week.
That's right, everybody. It's Tuesday night. This is the Fantasy Sports Corporation, and we are Divots and Pivots. I am Andrew LeDuc, joined, as always, by Bud Copeland at This Bud's for you over here to my right, your left, whatever you want to say. Bud, we're getting ready. This is the first full tournament of the year. I know we had the Century last week, but it's a small field. We're in it. We're diving in full this week. Are you ready? Are you ready to smash the season?
I like how you're teeing up this week as if it's a bigger deal than last week. Last week was not a full field, but it was an elite field.
It was still better.
But to your point, which is one of the cliches that I'm going to try to get rid of in 2024, one of my resolutions is going to be to stop saying "to your point" because it's played out just like first full field event of the season is going to be played out by the end of this week. But I'm pumped, man. It's golf at the beginning of the season over in Hawaii is always fun and entertaining. Not just because the scenery and then, the first tournament having all the champs from last year and an expanded field to include the top 50 FedEx Cup finishers from last year. So they really beefed that up, but it was a birdie fest out there and it's kind of fun. It's kind of like in other sports where every once in a while, I do want to see a 13-7, defensive battle. What are we drinking tonight? Pause.
Oh, we got a Hinch Irish whiskey tonight on
Good
the
God,
rock.
lush. I've got, Welch's apple juice on the rocks.
Nice.
That's a lot of apple juice. I feel like Bert Kreischer in his Kool-Aid thing.
I was just going to comment on the amount of apple juice.
It's mostly ice. Because in my Acorn Hills tumbler, I've got my leftover cold brew from earlier today. But every once in a while, you like a 13-7 defensive battle, just like every once in a while we like a battle with par. But this early in the year, we want to see some fireworks, and we got them last week at the Century, and I know we'll get into that a little bit. Shouts to Chris Kirk, fellow Bulldog, on getting the win, and his story is a really cool one. We'll talk about that. But I'm excited again for this week because it's set up to be another birdie fest. Waialae Country Club is just that. It's a local country club in Honolulu. So they definitely trick out the course a little bit for these guys. It was redone in 2018 by Tom Doak, but I'm excited. Like you said, first full field event, and the 2024 season is off and running. Did you catch any of the Century last week?
I did not this past week. I had just a million hours running around. Yeah, it was a busy weekend. But so no, I did not actually catch any of the coverage, but I was keeping track of kind of the goings on, and obviously did see Chris Kirk come down the stretch and seal the deal.
Before we go any further, I would be remiss if I did not pay homage. I did this last week. I fucking did this last week. You pay homage. You give homages, and I take umbrage with things. But the fish. I know we do. We when we get him on the show one of these days, we owe him an apology. I'm sure he's heard it before. The fish wives of Musselburgh. When I say the fish wives of Musselburgh, do you think I'm making something up?
Yeah, it sounds like one of your Buddhisms or something. I don't know.
Buddhisms. You make me sound like a redneck with the Farmer's Almanac as my human glossary. No, the fishwives of Musselburgh. So on this day in history, today's January 8th, for those of you that are listening to this on the podcast, but for those of you watching live, today is January 9th, not January 8th. It's January 9th. Thank you for that. Live in the now, Boudreaux. But in the town of Musselburgh back in 1811, it's a coastal town in Scotland. Obviously, when I say fishwives, you can guess what the main industry is there. And one of their kind of claims to fame is, well, they got a couple claims to fame. One is they hold claim for the longest time. They held claim, and now St. Andrews has come out and kind of challenged it as having the oldest continuously played golf course in the world, Musselburgh Links. Not to be confused with Royal Musselburgh. I do it all the time. So Musselburgh in in 1811, and it was by like local proclamation. Obviously, back in the early 1800s, women weren't allowed to play golf alongside the dudes. Famously, when you go to St. Andrews, you got to go to the Himalayas right next to the old course. I haven't been. I've just read about it and dreamt about it. It's this gigantic putting complex, and it's called the Himalayas because of the topography, and they make these mounds, and it's a putting golf course. It's almost like a chip and putt without the chipping. That's the only way that women were really getting involved at St. Andrews. But over in Musselburgh, 50 years before the Open Championship even started, they held the first women's golf tournament in history. It was in 1811, and the winner got themselves a nice new fish basket, because the theory was these women, the women of Musselburgh, the fish wives of Musselburgh, they're doing the work of men. So why not allow them to have the same recreational opportunities and fun as the men? So they held a golf tournament to crown the greatest golfer amongst the fish wives of Musselburgh. Are you Googling furiously to see if I'm making this up?
So no, I'm trying to interact with our audience, sir.
Shouts to the audience. Thank you for joining us at This Bud's For You. Don't forget the E. I don't want to get sued. And so they would give them, they gave them a nice new fish basket. And then when they realized that all they did was give them more work stuff, they also gave them a nice silk scarf. So 1811 on this day in history, first women's golf tournament, the Fishwives of Musselburgh. And Musselburgh Links actually hosted 6 Open Championships in the nascent days when it was part of the original three site Rota, which I still don't know why we say Rota instead of rotation, but that's a bitch fest for July when I go off on my Open thing. So shout out to the Fishwives of Musselburgh and all of their descendants. We toast to you in the history of golf on this day. But speaking of history, are you ready to dive into some of the news of the day / week?
Always, because there's been we're kicking off the new year with tons of new news, tons of Tiger news already, and sponsorship news across the board.
Well, we on last week when Jason Day, that was kind of the first one that came out.
Yeah, we kind of touched on it. Yeah, we didn't go in depth in it, but I think we're reaching a point now where it's time to go in depth in it a little bit, because I don't think these sponsorships are changing their business approach by accident. There seems to be a conscious decision here of reallocating their funds and their time and their effort. And sure, you can make the argument that if you don't know what we're talking about, by the way, Tiger and Nike split. It's been all over the news. If you're watching this show, you most likely know that after the 27 years of Nike-Tiger partnership, that is no more. So we'll see what shirts he will be wearing going forward. Although I say that even though last week with Rickie splitting from Puma, he changed the hat. He was just wearing an L on his hat, no big P for Puma on the hat, but he was still wearing a Puma shirt. So I'm not really sure how that works.
You're joking, right? You are absolutely fucking kidding me right now, right?
What? About what? I'm just talking.
The L on Rickie's hat.
What was it?
I did a whole thing about this on social media. Thanks for your help, or thanks for your support.
I didn't read it. I'm sorry.
Read. I don't write anymore.
I know the video. I didn't see your video.
I'm sorry. The L on Rickie's hat stood for Lahaina Luna High School, which is the local high school in Lahaina. And 2,000 feet up the hill, it's at the base of this kind of mountain or hill, and 2,000 feet up on the hill is this 30-foot L. And it's and it stands for Lahaina Luna High School. It's been up there since 1904. It's visible from everywhere around town, out in the water. And so Rickie got with Puma, or vice versa. I'm sure Rickie got with Puma, because if you don't, never mind. This is neither here nor there. But Rickie got with Puma and said, I want to do a special edition hat just for this week. And all proceeds are going to the recovery efforts from the wildfires out there.
I apologize. I missed that.
Rickie,
that makes so much more sense.
But if you're new to the show, I'm the golf guy. He's the sports brain. I know it's tough. But Rickie, though, he did make news after the Century, but because what you just said did get people kind of chirping, and Rory McIlroy even kind of let it slip that a guy like Rickie might be a good grab for LIV. Rickie came out and did the Tony Finau. I ain't going fucking nowhere. He did the Wolf of Wall Street kind of gig. He's staying here. He's staying put. To your point, Jason Day not dropping, but parting ways with Nike himself and going over to this Malbon Golf, which if you've never heard of it, join the club. Last year, Justin Thomas signed with a new brand, and I want to say it's like Grayson or something like that. It's got a wolf. It's a really tight. We're seeing that trend of golfers hopping off of the top tier golfers, kind of hopping off of the main bandwagon and kind of going for some of these hip or these more relatable brands. But I don't think it's necessarily just the golfers. Rory McIlroy was on a podcast talking about, I mean, we got to go there next, because he was on that podcast saying like, hey, maybe I was a little wrong. Maybe I was a little too quick to judge. He didn't say he was wrong. He just was a little quick to judge. You know, he kind of looking back now, maybe he wouldn't have reacted the same way.
He more so reflected on his tone and than what he said. I think he still believed in what he said.
And what he was getting at was he was a little concerned with how the PGA Tour, when this became an arms race with LIV, and that's where I take umbrage, used it right that time. I take umbrage with Greg Norman coming out going, yeah, it was good to see Roy kind of fall on his sword a little bit. Fuck off, Greggy. Nobody's falling on their sword. You did not win anything. You don't have a superior product. Your superiors outgunned and outbanked the PGA Tour. And so that's what Rory was getting at, is we were trying to keep up, and the money's just getting bigger and bigger. But then pause. We're not changing the product that much. This isn't me souring on it. It's the reality of it all. And that's where I think some of this money, where these 6 year, $100 million contracts, maybe Nike's just going, we're not putting our money there anymore. We don't need those humans anymore like we used to get the eyeballs we want. You know, so that's why you might have these folks kind of go into the more niche brands left and right. And where Tiger's going to fall, let's see. Jack Nicklaus was with, Spalding forever, and he was with this and he was with that. And what do you know? The last 35 years of his life, he was wearing his own brand. Arnold Palmer, he was with other people. As famously, Arnold Palmer is the one who changed the entire pro sports or pro golf game to make it a moneymaker with endorsements. And his agent was the guy who founded IMG Academy. It's a whole different cool story. Go check it out. I think his name is Mark McCormick. But then towards the end of his life, what do we all remember? The umbrella. Like, Tiger's going to just launch his own brand, even if it is partnered with a smaller, newer kind of upstart who he believes in, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think that's just, I'm glad you went there, because I think these lesser known, smaller niche brands, as you said, as they get more involved with these higher end athletes and these bigger names, Justin Thomas, Tiger Woods, whoever does end up continuing to sign with them, I think it's only going to make the game more accessible than it already is, because all of a sudden these golfers are going to be spread out across all these different brands. These brands, like, no one brand, like, say it's simple supply and demand and monopoly, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a business major, but if you have all the top golfers all under the Nike umbrella in the world, Nike can basically do whatever they want as far as what they're going to charge for their product to casual golfers. Like, their whole business model is going to be based off of, like, we are the best, and we can prove that we're the best. Like, it's just going to land that way. If everyone's spread out, then I feel like things are going to be a bit more reasonably priced to the casual golfer fan. I think the wealth is going to be more spread out across the business of golf, and that all is only going to equal golf becoming even more accessible to the casual fan to grow the game a little bit more. I think there's just now an active business model change on multiple levels of golf that they are, countering what LIV's doing.
Welcome to capitalism. We're happy to have you. Competition drives prices down, makes things more accessible, and that is kind of the cycle we're in, because nowadays it's not cool to have what everybody else has. It's kind of cool to have stuff that's really high quality that other people don't have yet, but you're welcoming them in, much like Acorn Hills.
Like, the reason I was just gonna say it. I got the new 3/4 zip. The quarter zip. Came in. Okay. So
yeah, it looks good on you. I've got the Be Brave hoodie on right now. TBFY 15 for 15% off when you go over and see them. But yeah, Tiger and Nike split. And one more thing about the Jason Day, and then I want to kind of push this forward. But Jason Day, the reason he said a couple of things. His contract was up with Nike, and I doubt that they were going to re-up, or like we've been saying, I doubt they were saying, yeah, sure, you want another 6 years, $100 million. They were probably like, we'll send you free pants, maybe some nice slacks. You can have Tiger's shoes. Scotty Scheffler was wearing like an old pair of Tiger Woods kind of throwbacks at the Century, which kind of got people a little bit of tear, because it was like, oh, that's kind of sweet. I don't know if it was on purpose or whatever, but Jason Day said he wanted something more comfortable. He was not happy with how the direction with golf gear in general was going to the more svelte, tight-fitting, athletic kind of look. And if you notice, he was people were making fun of him, and I'm sure Jason Day was really upset about being made fun of, but I loved it. I could get behind it. His pants were kind of baggy by modern standards. They almost looked like the late 90s, early 2000s pleated, slacks, but they had patterns on them. His polo shirt looked like he was on day 3 of a golf trip, and it was the second time he had worn it, just how it was fitting. But what he said was, I want to be comfortable out there. At the end of the day, I just want to be comfortable. So whatever these guys have to do, and I mean, the younger guys are out there wearing joggers for the same reasons. It's not because, a cinched ankle actually looks good on a man. I'm joking. I own some myself, but it's that they're comfortable, and that's what they want to wear. So comfort wins. And speaking of winning, Chris Kirk at the Century, just real quick. Love his story. If you're not familiar with Chris Kirk, not Christian Kirk, that's a football player and somebody that Andrew tried to draft last year. But Chris Kirk is a Georgia Bulldog who kind of went to the depths and back. He struggled with some mental health issues, specifically some substance abuse issues. And I loved hearing his interview after the win, because they were asking him about, and he's like, it's hard to do this, but when you're not clouded, I'm editorializing on his comments, but when you're not clouded by substance abuse or irresponsible behavior, and you can really focus in on what it takes to win. He said he's in love with the process. He's in love with the things that he has to do every single day to be the best version of himself. I thought it was inspirational. I thought it was really cool. And how well he was playing, how dialed in. I mean, don't be surprised if he goes off again this week, but look out for Chris Kirk this season. He won last year. He's been flirting around with the top. I think he'd be a dark horse right now for the President's Cup later on this year. And then we'd make a call on the Ryder Cup. But the biggest news out of the Century for me, and you just said you missed it, was Kevin Kisner on the call.
I didn't miss that. How could you miss that?
Kevin Kisner absolutely was. He Don Cheadled the Century. He outshined the performance there, because we all knew what we were going to get, a birdie fest. Who's going to come out on top?
That's just what the Hawaii swing is.
My boy Akshay, let's go AB. This is going to be our year. He was kind of up there for a while, and he didn't drop off so much as I just don't think he had that next gear. His putter has come out of nowhere. But Kisner on the call was a perfect. I think NBC, don't fuck this up. Don't make Kiz do anything that he doesn't need to be doing or want to be doing. I'm not saying you bow to him, but his player analysis was fresh. Paul Azinger, the reason that I think people gave Paul so much crap is Paul kind of followed the model of Johnny Miller. Difference is Johnny Miller was Johnny Miller, and Paul Azinger, don't get me wrong, wonderful, champion, historic Hall of Famer, etc. But he wasn't quite Johnny Miller. I mean, when Johnny Miller was really competitive, they were talking about him challenging Jack for the title of greatest. And we see how that worked out. But he kind of wagged his finger a little bit, stuck his nose up. Kiz has grown his brand to be a man of the people. This ain't no hobby. That legend that he's got out there. Yes, he's our guy. He dinks it out there 250, and he admits that he loves being the short knocker off the tee who might shank one here or there, but then he's going to drain a 20-footer for birdie or to save his par just to watch the look on your face. He
walked around with the confidence and attitude as if he was blasting it, 400 yards down the fairway.
No, but
which
another
highlight from the week love about him as well.
Another highlight from the week was a drive. Max Homa, longest drive on the Shot Link era. It's like 470 something. I didn't see the details. Did he get cart path, or was this just he had to?
I actually did. I didn't see a video of it either, but I saw the post about it. I saw the article about it. It's just madness. Like he had to have gotten some help. That's longest drive competition numbers right there.
Or it's just good karma. He deserves it. Max Homa, here's to you.
But quickly,
speaking of
Kisner, to wrap up Kisner, just because I want to say this, I loved his comments on how it ended up that he got a chance to help broadcast this week. I don't know if you saw them, but he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing, I heard they were having tryouts. I had an open weekend, so why not spend it in Hawaii? Like,
get a free trip to Hawaii out of it. Okay, I did catch that.
He just kind of like downplayed it. Says like, it'd be stupid not to get a free trip to Hawaii. Basically, is the kind of the tone he took about it, which I just love. Well, he's like, I'm just out here, free and having fun.
He doesn't need the money. He's obviously not there as a competitor this week, but Kiz might be one of those guys that he could see the writing on the wall, and he's like, I can either grind it out for another 10 years trying to chase these guys, or I can, I'm a 5-time PGA Tour winner, which, I mean, winning once on the PGA Tour, people hang their hats on for eternity, which is understandable. So he's got the credentials, he's got the bona fides, he doesn't need the money. So he was just out there for a good time and to see how the chemistry was. And I think he brought great balance and kind of an updated perspective to the game. But speaking of karma, one more piece of news, and then let's look ahead to the rest of the season. I mean, we're going to talk about, obviously, if you tuned in for some fantasy analysis, we're going to get to that after the halfway point at the bottom of the hour, as they would say in the biz. But karma came full circle for Mr. Patrick Reed.
Oh
my God! Did you see this news?
So when I saw the news headline for that, I almost didn't think it was real. Like, I kind of read it and said, this seems like such a troll headline that there's no way this is real. So I'm going to try to sum it up here, and you're going to correct me. I know you are.
No, I want to hear how you understand it.
The way I kind of read it and understood it in summary is that he sued for defamation, and a court found that there was no defamation. And on top of that, him suing and bringing this to court was a waste of money and time for everyone involved, and they tacked him with a fine instead, basically, right?
Yeah, the ruling was dope. I'm a little bit of a
it's like when you're a kid and you go and tattle on your sibling and you get spanked for tattling. Like,
yeah, you get put in a timeout for being a narc. He went after Brandel Chambly, Eamon Lynch, Golf Channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And when I was thinking about this, I'm like, you're going after people who's in a whole channel whose opinion is, or whose purpose is to have an opinion. These people, that's what they get paid for. Brandel even says it. Like, I mean, that's part of his job, is to have a stance, have a thought, have an opinion.
Yeah.
And then the judge said, no. And by the way, you need to pay them back. So yeah, the judge dismissed the two claims, the two motions. My best friend Jeff would fill us in. Lawyer Jeff, tell me, is it a claim or a motion? But dismissed the two motions and then said, oh, by the way, you need to pay these people back for wasting all of our time. And I'm pretty sure if the judge could have asked him for his time back, he would have as well. So couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I think I've given him the benefit of the doubt for so long, but fuck.
He waved at you. That's all that matters, right?
I know, and now I'm disappointed in myself for not getting in a better barb than I did. But you know what? Sometimes you get blinded by the lights. All right, so the century is over. We got the Sony Open on the horizon, but the rest of the year is shaping up. So the century was the first signature event, and I know last week we kind of blew through them, but what strikes me, we got the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. So the rest of the signature events of the year, and the signature events this year kind of go down like this. If you're used to the elevated event, or they've called them designated events, elevated events, now they're called signature events. And aside from just having a fatter purse and prize money and that kind of stuff, they're now having limited fields in all but 3 of them. So the rest of the signature events, the Century was one of them, and they had not a limited field, but limited in comparison to others. I mean, 59, so that is limited field. I'll shut up and go back to my business. The rest of them are the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, the Genesis, Arnold Palmer's Bay Hill Invitational, brought to you by MasterCard, the Heritage, Wells Fargo, the Memorial, and the Travelers. Now, the Memorial is Jack's tournament, Arnie's tournament is Bay Hill, and the Genesis is Tiger's show. Those 3 will still have limited fields, but they're going to have a 36-hole cut. And they're going to have a 36-hole cut down to like the top 50 in ties. So there is still going to be that element. They're playing for $20 million, and there's also going to be some tweaks in there and how the winner's share is distributed versus the other fields. I'm a little shocked here at the Heritage and the Wells Fargo holding their positions. But I think it's because they need it. And we talked about this before. Waste Management doesn't need the title. Some of these other, they don't need that kind of head nod. They're a big enough, event to themselves. But out of that, Pebble Beach, Genesis, Arnold Palmer, Heritage, Wells Fargo, Memorial, Travelers. What are your thoughts on what do you think is going to be the most intriguing signature event of the year?
So a couple reasons. The Genesis, just because we know Tiger's going to most likely play that. It's just, you can't get away from it. So the Genesis,
that's his tournament.
Exactly. So and he said his goal is to play 1 a month, which I still think is a bit ambitious for him just from what we've seen, but if he knows how he feels, we'll see. So the Genesis is going to have that draw about it. Honestly, out of those right there, still my favorite that I think still has a big draw, the Arnold Palmer for me. I love the Arnold Palmer. I think just being at Bay Hill and the scenery of that, it's just the Arnold Palmer for me is the most intriguing out of all those for me. I mean, maybe the Travelers just because it's closer to where me and you are, and there's always that off chance to shoot down there and see it, but it's never happened. So who knows? But I'm curious to know, when it comes to these signature events in the limited fields, are you fine with them being limited fields, or does this?
No.
Do you think?
No, I'm not.
Because I don't either. Because I understood the purpose of the PGA coming out with these signature events to, obviously they were very clear, to raise the purse, the total purse amount for the field. But to me, that meant that also played into the lower end golfers. The second tier, second, third, fourth tier golfers that we don't know a ton about, that are playing for their cards, that are playing for their careers. It almost feels like it's getting more exclusive somehow, and it seems like that is completely opposite of everything they've been preaching for the last 2 years with all the live stuff, and that like the 36 hole cut and the limited field. It's like, what are we doing here? Are you trying to take aspects of live and call them your signature events now? Because that is just a complete 180 from the stance I thought you took. And just from my own personal belief, these signature events should be a full field. I thought the whole purpose was to be the big grand event that isn't already a major. It just doesn't feel that way to me with it being a limited field.
If I wanted to, I could sit here and just be a horse's ass and push back on you about the whole inclusivity thing. And I would go the Rory route. This is pro golf. This is elite golf. Play better. You want
sure, I get that too. Yeah.
The thing that the PGA Tour, I don't necessarily agree that I'm about to contradict myself, but the thing that they have over live is more avenues and opportunity for this kind of stuff, not just the small money, but the fact that there are ways to get in there. What I have an issue with, and Mackenzie Hughes, Canadian golfer, he basically got in because John Rahm, we talked about this. He got in because John Rahm bounced. He moved up from 51 to 50. So he got a little bit of spotlight, and he was given some interviews recently. Pete Dye Stadium, of course, at La Quinta, the American Express. Sorry. Mackenzie Hughes was talking about, he was pissed. And he was pissed about the fact that, first of all, he was at the tournament where they had that players meeting with Jay, and it was the top 30. And he's sitting there going, I'm like number 50 or 55. You mean to tell me I'm not good enough to at least be in the room? Like, you can't just say, hey, Max.
Was he the one Was he the one that shouted out from the back? It wasn't him, because that name
because he wasn't in the room. He wasn't in the room. That's his whole point.
Oh, I thought you just said he was. I thought you just said he was. I'm sorry.
No, he was saying he was pissed off because he's like, why just the top 30 guys, And then all of a sudden they get this note saying these signature events are going to be limited fields, and he admits, he goes, listen, I'm an idiot to not play in them. I can play in them now. I'm the top 50, so I've unlocked all these doors. But his problem was around process, and that's kind of. There's the underbelly. I'm over here. I am of the camp that everything's going to be fine. It doesn't mean that everything is great all the time. And I do think that was a miss. And I think that if you're going to do these signature events and you want to prove how good and how robust your player pool is, you don't follow the live path of limited fields. Maybe do like two a year. If you really want to do like some super, so just 3 times a year, you've got that century field that is like only going to be 30 guys, whatever it is, then do one around the midpoint. That's only 30, the top 30. And then do one at the very end. It's called the Tour Championship. We do it anyway, but everything else, I do kind of, I'm going to take umbrage one more time. I do take a little umbrage with limited fields for these signature events, because having 100, it doesn't matter if you start with 70 or start with 155, as long as after 36 holes, you cut it down to 70. That's the whole idea of professional golf. And so to get rid of that, you do lose a little bit of leverage in in whatever bullshit kind of public debate that goes on, where I see people online, live golf's winning and PGA Tour is struggling. Yeah, this is workplace drama. They asked Kevin Kisner, they asked Kisner, they're like, if golf ain't a hobby, what are you hobby? He's like, hunting, fishing, and parenting. And I was like, it's not bad. It's not bad. He's like, yeah, this is my job. So to have them be limited bugs me a little bit. And, but I'm still going to watch. I'm still a junkie. And I think I'm most looking forward to the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. I'm glad that they gave that signature event status. because you do see the famous faces. Pebble Beach has got to be one of the most iconic, if not the most recognizable golf course, save maybe Augusta National, to the golf person. I think to the general public, the 17th at Sawgrass, and I am biased there.
Yeah,
so Pebble Beach Pro-Am's around the corner. We do have Genesis, like you said. Tiger said, "See you in LA," and his little tweet, and I think that is where we're going to see him wearing. I don't know. I hope that he utilizes. I don't know what the deals are with him and Nike and who's got copyrights over like Frank, the little tiger logo and that kind of stuff.
Well, and I wonder, if he's gonna retain the rights to the TW that he doesn't have, like maybe that just turns into the brand of clothing he wears. Like who knows? We'll see how the business then shakes out.
One last musing around that, and then we'll hear from our friends at Underdog. I don't think this would happen because of the nature with which Nike and him were kind of publicly giving each other verbal bouquets and kissing each other, saying goodbye.
I know, they really were.
But you see something like the Jumpman brand that is, that's kind of under that Nike umbrella, tangentially related. I don't know if it's like a co-owner kind of thing. I don't know what the hell's going on over there, but I could see that but at the same time, if that was going to be the case, there wouldn't have been all that rigmarole. They would have probably just rolled it out, or they would have said something a little softer. They would have kind of teased it out. So I'm looking forward to the TW brand. I hope it's not hokey, but in the meantime, let's see what our friends at Underdog have to say about it.
Is Air Jordan part of Nike? I always forget. Maybe that's another option. Let's hear from Underdog, though. Just get my last word in.
Fantasy Sports Corp and Underdog Fantasy have teamed up to start your fantasy season off in the win column with Best Ball. What is Best Ball? It's quite simply the easiest way to win. No team management, no trades, no waivers. It's their biggest contest ever, and it has only gotten bigger. You simply have to sit and win. You don't even have to set your lineup. Always get your best score every week. Just enter a contest, draft your team, and Underdog will do the rest. What could make this even better? How about free money, up to $100 using our exclusive promo code? Go online now and use the promo code DIVPIV to double your deposit up to $100. You tell them Gingerbread sent you. Good girl.
Let's get into the Sony Open. You teased it. Let's end that tease right now. We're in the Hawaii swing, and as we alluded to at the Century Open last week, the Hawaii swing is usually birdie fest. I always remember the Hawaii swing from years ago when Justin Thomas kind of broke through. He went on an absolute run in Hawaii and carried that through into the Texas swing as well. That's I always think of this as an opportunity for someone to appear and to be highlighted out of nowhere early on in the season that then gets us hyped up for the rest of the season on a guy like that. So let's look at why is it Wile?
Mm-hmm. Either or.
I was gonna say you nodded to Paul.
Man. I thought it was Ludwig Aberg for a while.
Yeah, I know. Well, we both did, to be fair. But look, this is an interesting course because, like we've said, everything points to a scoring fest, a birdie fest here. But quietly, this is also a course that has lower fairways made than the tour average. So this is a course that is hard to hit the fairway. It seems like a lot of people miss the fairway, but that just means that the scrambling percentage is also up. Opportunities are there if you do miss the fairway. So missing the fairway is not the end of the world for you here, but it obviously helps you get to that higher scoring when you are competing against guys who are going to go low no matter what. So those are the things we are looking at here at Waialae Country Club. Do you have any historical facts to hit us with about Waialae before we get into some more nitty gritty stats?
Well, you were talking about the you were talking about the accuracy aspect, and then, I do have a fun fact for you. And I mentioned earlier, Tom Doak, 2018, renovated the course. And when you see a lot of descriptions, you see tree-lined fairways. You see that, and you see it's very narrow. The difference is it's flat, and so are the greens, which is why it can turn into a birdie fest as long as you keep the ball in play. As a matter of fact, Andrew, I do have a fun fact about the Sony Open in Hawaii. It was back in 1983. It was back in 1983 that Isao Aoki became the first Japanese golfer to win on the PGA Tour. He, in 1980 or 81, I can't remember, somebody fact checked me, he kind of burst onto the world scene. He was well known in Japan. And again, for the kids out there, back in the 80s, it wasn't necessarily everything wasn't global. People weren't jet setting and hopping all over all the time. So it was people, there would be players who would spend their entire lives over in Europe or in Japan and maybe only once come over or twice a year for the majors, and then we would never see him again, as opposed to now where you got people playing on 2, 3, 4 tours, as long as it's not live. So Isao Aoki made his name over in Japan, and then he pushed Jack Nicklaus at a US Open in the early 80s, one of Jack's finals and final majors. And he kind of, made a name for himself. He got status. He's over here on the PGA Tour eventually. And in 1983, this is the cool part about the story, not just the fact that he won, but it's how he won. Going into the 72nd hole, he needed a birdie to force a playoff, dunked it from 128 for an eagle and the win. So Isao Aoki, 1983 Sony Open in Hawaii. I don't know if it was the same time of year, because these early tournaments sometimes used to be fall events that got moved around. But I will tell you, it was 1983. Shouts to Isao Aoki and the Japanese golfers out there, which Ricky Fowler, his father, or I think it's his grandfather on his mom's side, maybe. But I do know that Ricky's got some Japanese in him as well in his history. So that's the fun fact from me. Par 70, 7,044 yards. As far as key stats are concerned, I'm taking a little different approach this year with my key three. First of all, I might take a page out of your playbook and have more than three, but I'm fighting it. I'm doing 3 this week. Only doing 3 this week.
Okay.
But it was hard. It was hard because I had to drop some of them off. And last year I was using putting and ball striking no matter what. And I've decided this year that putting and ball striking, and if you don't know my history, strokes gained putting, I mean, at any given moment, a putter can absolutely just launch you into contention. You saw that with Akshay this last week at the Century. His putter was kind of his Achilles heel last year. And that's how the pro game works, or that's how the game works in general, though, macro to micro. And now that he's kind of got that putter under control, look out for AB. But strokes gained putting and strokes gained ball striking. Ball striking takes strokes gained approach and strokes gained off the tee, and it combines those to a category called ball striking. And that's why I like it, because if you ask anybody in DFS golf universe, strokes gained approach is generally considered the best kind of, you had to take one single stat and kind of hang your hat on it to how a player is playing at the moment. How are they in strokes gained approach? So I say, especially in a place like Waialae Country Club, and if we're butchering that, somebody correct us. I say the tee well off the tee, and you've got a great approach game. Then on a flat greens like this, eventually you'll get them rolling in. So I'm doing strokes gained ball striking, bogeys avoided. It's going to be a birdie fest. Everybody's going to be making birdies. And, the Brooks Koepka kind of mantra of, I've only got to beat 12 guys. So who in those top 20 are not going to be making the mistakes that have you just kind of fall out of contention down the line? And then last but certainly not least, proximity 100 to 125. I thought about doing par 3, 175 to 200, because that's the range of those par 3s. And my theory was, if you can snag a couple of strokes on the field in your par 3 game here, that's going to be a difference maker. But instead, I went back and looked at those par 4s, and they're not long. They only got a couple that are over 450. So these guys are going to have wedges in all the time. Now, they might not be bombing at 350, 360 just to keep a little more under control, but they can still rip these driving irons out there 300 plus and give themselves 100 to 125 yards in. So proximity 100 to 125. Who's setting themselves up for birdies? Now, this is where I had to struggle. Do I go with opportunities gained, converting those? But nope, we're sticking to our key 3: proximity to 100, 125, bogey avoidance, and strokes gained ball striking. Back to you in the studio.
I find the 100 to 125 proximity very interesting, because I took a different approach than that is, and where we are complete opposite on that. But I want to start off with I like your approach to it being a birdie fest. So you're going to go to the bogey avoidance, because most people, and me included in the past, when I hear birdie fest, I would immediately go to the stat of birdies or better. But to your point, bogey avoidance is a much better stat when it comes to making the cut and finishing high, because you want to avoid shooting yourself in the foot, because in a birdie fest, one birdie is all it's going to take to kind of take you out of the run. Like, because if guys are clicking off birdies like crazy, you go backwards one stroke, like you're gonna drop 20 spots.
When's the last time you were in a birdie fest?
Never. Well, how many birdies does it take to beat a birdie fest? But so what I'm saying is I like that approach, going against the grain just by simple way of wording. For me though,
I'm a contrarian.
I took a different approach on the proximity. I actually went proximity 150 to 175 because I'm taking the approach that because of the narrow tree-lined fairways that do play lower accuracy than a tour event, that I think there's going to be a lot more controlled club choice off of the tee box. I'm thinking more irons, more woods, more hybrids, to where these guys are going to sit just a little bit further back than they would be when they're hitting that driver. And I think that 150 to 175 range is going to be a bit more accurate to the range that they're going to be taking these approach shots from. So that's one of my key three. Strokes gained off the tee, I took a slightly different approach, but with kind of the same mentality as you. I know you included tee to green, but that's because I still included strokes gained approach as part of my, no matter what I'm playing that. And then my other key three is par 4, 450 to 500, another thing that we are completely opposite on. Now, this is close because there's almost equal par 4s that are 450 to 500 and 400 to 450. So you could have gone either way with that. Quite frankly, I took the lazy approach where 450 to 500 was already keyed into my stat model from last week, and I just stuck with it. So, I just stuck with it. So, approximately 150 to 1. Yes.
Real quick, the 150 to 175 versus the 100 to 125. Two things. A, let's remind one of the interns to track that and find out, which one had, what distance category had more of those approach shots coming in.
I can give you the historic numbers if you'd like, because I have those right in front of me. The historic numbers are 11.8% of approach shots are from 100 to 125, and historically, what did I say again? I said 150 to 175. Historically, 20.3% are from 150 to 175.
Fuck you. I don't believe the numbers. But the USGA and the RNA, I trust the moose.
I know.
The USGA and the PGA not the PGA, sorry, the USGA and the RNA, given their golf ball rollback stuff, they want more of those approach shots to be in the 150 to 175. It's not going to happen. These guys are too freaking good at what they do, and it's going to have increment. That all came down when we were in our off season. I can't believe we haven't dove into the golf ball thing, but it'll be interesting to see, because I have no problem eating crow and being wrong. It's happened before. But at the end of the day, I do think that it's if you can take off the tee and approach and combine them, you've got ball striking.
And you're not wrong. You're not wrong there. But you know me, I like to break it down into complete separate groups and have probably more stats, key stats than needed. And you take the more condensed version, and somehow at the end of the year, we end up as far as
it comes down to the Tour Championship.
I was going to say, as far as who we're picking and who's done better with their picks throughout the year, we're always even. It's a wild thing. It just shows you how crazy the game of golf will be. Talking about picks, talking about how you can play fantasy golf and how you can play along with the pros here. We're switching things up this year. So last year and the year before, we mainly talked about DraftKings pricing, how you build a lineup on DraftKings. And it makes sense. DraftKings is one of the industry leaders in how you play fantasy golf and all of fantasy sports in general. With our partnership with Underdog partnership with Underdog Fantasy, what? Do you have more to say?
I was going to say, but like we were talking about earlier in the show, the trend is, if everybody's doing it, but you can find a similar experience, a similar product, a similar service from a trustworthy, fun, new, vibrant kind of avenue. And this is where I could start making jokes about we've jumped from PGA to LIV, but we're not. We're just kind of going over and we're trying a different style of DFS.
Exactly.
And it's been a lot of fun. It's been a mentality shift, and I'll let you get back into what makes it different over at Underdog Fantasy. But it just hit me like a million light bulbs going off at once, that we're doing exactly what I was talking about earlier, which is trying to do something a little different just for the shits and giggles, and eventually, hopefully, the massive amounts of endorsement checks. I'm just kidding.
Well, but even not just for the shits and giggles, I think in the end, because of the way we are going to approach building our lineups for Underdog Fantasy, which means the way we're going to approach building our rankings and our picks, is going to actually help all of you universally across the different formats, because you will still be able to use the rankings that we are about to give to you here in a few minutes across DraftKings, across FanDuel. Yes, are you going to have to maybe get a little creative with how you fit them into your budget sometimes? Yes. But as a whole, our rankings are still going to be true to what we believe the tournament is going to end up with. So with Underdog Fantasy, to sum it up now, they are one-round contests. Every now and then they do have specialty contests that last the entire tournament, but they are one-round contests. So if you struggle on day one in round one, you have a chance to try again in round two. But the way you pick your team is not like your FanDuels. It's not like your DraftKings where you're picking based off of a salary. It's snake draft style. So you are in a quote-unquote league contest with anywhere from 2 other people to 11 other people. It ranges from 3 to 12 people contests, and it's snake draft
pickup
style.
Games.
Yeah, it's snake draft style. Depending on how many people are in the contest will depend on how many people you have on your team. And then from there, once you pick your team through like any other fantasy draft, it all comes down to finishing position, birdies made. All the scoring is basically the same as what you're used to. So, but the draft is more fun. It allows you to get some higher end picks, if you want to call them that, if you want to take the risk that some of the more popular hyped up names higher in the rankings going to finish well. And then it gives you the freedom to really throw some wrenches and get some nice sleeper picks into your lineup as well that nobody else is going to be paying attention to, because most people in these drafts, I'm finding, stick to the rankings up at the top. So you are able to find those diamonds in the roughs and slide them in to your lineup, which brings us to our next segment that you will see pretty much every week this year. We call it the Emergency 9. And as you saw on the screen, if you listen to the podcast form, the Emergency 9 is going to be our rankings for the week. But break us down why we're calling it 9. Why are we doing 9 instead of 10? Does it just make you tingle inside and feel happy that we're using a golf number? Is that really all it is?
I don't ever want to hear you say tingle inside while you're referring to me, but yes, I couldn't have us do a top 10 in the sport of golf where 9 is just right there and accessible. That would be like having a top 20 instead of an 18. And also in the house where I was raised, there was a rule. If there was enough daylight to get 9 holes in, it was an emergency. It was called an emergency 9. We would just yell it out. And then if you weren't in the car in 5 minutes, you missed that 9-hole round. And that was just kind of how it was. So we've got our emergency 9 coming to you this year. And I'm excited about it. I am excited about this Underdog Fantasy, doing something new, doing the snake draft. And like you said, you can shit the bed on Thursday. You can tee it back up on Friday. There is no cut. So you can always play the weekend. And I'm curious, now I'm using our friends over at Fantasy National and their wonderful information, except for that flawed statistic about the approaches at the Sony Open. I think they need to check that one, but I'm using that as a guide. I'm not necessarily going to cut and paste my picks just because the model says so. You know me, I think I can outsmart the model. I'm way too arrogant to actually think that the statistics are right. My gut and my golf knowledge and just sheer determination are going to figure this out. But I am going to use them as a guide. And so I do have, at the top of my model, I've got a couple of those guys in there, but then I went way out there and I've got some gut shots. And so I'm going to give you my 9, 8, and 7. And then I want to hear who you got.
Perfect. That's
how it's going to go every week. We're going to go back and forth, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. That totals 9. Actually, that totals 18, but 9 for
18.
each of us. And I would say that if there was a front 9 and back 9, you would be the front 9 and I'd be the back 9, if you know what I'm saying.
And that's what the season-long results did last year. So yes.
Number 9 for me this week. He's 61st in my model. I went ball striking, bogeys avoid, in proximity 100 to 125. This guy ranked out 61st, but I've already talked about him. The putter's going and he's young. He's got that confidence. And just because the model says 61, my eyeballs tell me he's playing better than that. Sure. So Akshay, come on down. You're number 9 on Bud's list. Let's go AB. This is going to be our year. Number 8 on my list, 22 in my model, Brendan Todd, another Bulldog. And I have got a history of talking shit about this guy, mostly because when I pick him, he shits the bed and then he'll go on a run for like 4 weeks after that. But he's another Kiz. And I don't just mean a Bulldog. I mean, he's a short knocker. He's short, he's straight. And when he's hitting it well, he goes on those birdie runs. And then I'm back to my rankings. Number 7, both in my rankings and in my model, is Ryan Moore. Ryan Moore is one of those names that he's kind of like Ryan
One of those
Palmer.
guys I always end up playing.
Yeah, and he had a pretty successful run at the in the FedEx All Swing or whatever the hell they called it last year. Put that to bed. And one of his last couple tournaments, he was gaining 4 or 5, sometimes 10 strokes on the field. And so I think that Ryan Moore, maybe if he can ride that wave, it's a long time to be off from golf, but we'll see how it goes. Akshay, Brendan Todd, Ryan Moore, 987. What do you got for me, kid?
I love it. And I love that you said that you don't just go strictly by the numbers. You use your eye as well. You use your rankings from Fantasy National as your guideline and your starter. Because I do the same. And although Fantasy National provides you more than enough stats to just blindly follow the numbers, I also break away from that. And for instance, I've came across through someone else's research a nice little stat this week of the past winners or the recent, I think it was like a 10-year span of winners at this tournament at the Sony Open. And they pretty much all did not play the week before at the Century, what used to be called the Century Tournament of Champions. Just a little tidbit that, sure, to have success in fantasy and on Underdog Fantasy, do you have to have the winner? Not necessarily. So that could be an outlier stat. Sure, maybe the winner wasn't at the Century and maybe the next 6 guys were, which is why I considered it. And then once I got far enough down my rankings of ignoring those guys, I went back and added them back in. So let me get back into my rankings. At number 9 in my rankings, number 15 in my overall rankings is Chad Ramey. And if you are playing DraftKings, he's 6,500 on DraftKings this week. He's got that top 10 in the 150 to 175 and those par 4s as well. He's a top 20. So I like Chad Ramey as my number 9, number 15 as the overall rankings. And then Aaron Rye at number 8, number 13 overall as well, 7,500 on DraftKings. Aaron Rye, I know he's a favorite of yours. Aaron Rye, we haven't really seen him recently. We haven't seen him since the Zozo, but he's a guy who he's just a solid iron player, wedge player. So I think he's going to have no problem getting it into these.
Tommy Two Gloves.
Tommy Two Gloves. And then coming in at my number 7, who's actually, now we're going to get a lot closer into my overall rankings. Number 7 and number 9 in my overall, a guy that I personally did not hear of until this week, Callum Tarrant. Callum Tarrant, yes, you heard that right. 6,400 on DraftKings, 3% projected owner over there if that's where you're playing. Once again, you can use these rankings however you want to. But Callum Tarrant, his putter is slightly a little shaky, but if you're going to have a course where you're going to find your putter again, a nice flat, medium firm, kind of average speed greens is going to be the place where you're going to be able to get it back to basics. So those are my 9, 8, 7 in Chad Ramey, Aaron Rye, and Callum Tarrant.
I thought you were just making. I thought you were just making things up when you said kind of medium firms, whatever the hell. There was a quasi-sexual way you just described those greens. I'm just going to put it out there. All right, I go back to my model, and as I get to the top, I do lean on it a little bit more because it just starts making sense, especially when it passes the eye test, like it does for my number 5 guy. But my number 6 guy to start with he's 6th in my model. He's 6th on my list because of that. 7,600 too. You're probably gonna get some leverage there, but JJ Spawn, he's one of those names that every once in a while in a birdie fest, I've seen JJ and JT Poston and JJ Spawn can go on runs with birdies. And so JJ Spawn, I've got him in the number 6 spot. Number 5, Frog Nation. If you're not familiar with Boston Common Golf, get familiar. We'll talk about it more next week because it was a big disappointment for us that TGL is not launching, but Tyrrell Hatton. He is one of my favorites of all time. He went off, was shot like 61, 62. I think he shot 61 maybe. Or no, it was 62 because it was 11 under and still just blew me away. Remember, Century was par 73. So we got JJ Spawn, Tyrrell Hatton, and Benny On. It's so good to see Benny On back in action. He was another one. He set a tournament record he set a PGA Tour record for most birdies in a tournament at the Century. So he's in form, Tyrrell's in form, and JJ Spawn is my guy who can go off at a moment's notice. What do you got over there?
Yeah, so real fast on Tyrrell Hatton. I don't know if you saw his quick comments this week after shooting an 8 under round, and he did his interview afterwards. He did nothing but talk crap about himself, basically. And someone said, "You do realize you just had an 8 under round?" And he says, "Yeah, but I've gotten really good at talking bad at myself, so I'm going to stick with being negative." It was the most Tyrrell Hatton thing I've ever heard, and I loved every second.
love him.
I love him so much. Yeah, my 6-4, so number 6 for me. And coming up overall, number 8 in my rankings. Like I said, this is where I'm going to follow my overall rankings more. Tyler Duncan at 6,600. And this is, like I said, this is why I said our rankings can be used across, because a lot of these guys I've named out, at least so far, are really low price on DraftKings. So you're going to be able to get my top 3 and still afford pretty much my entire 9, 6 out of my 9 easily. So Tyler Duncan, I think he's got a good putter right now. He's good off the tee. He's a nice, accurate driver. So Tyler Duncan. And then coming in at number, what are we on, 5 now? At number 5, Taylor Pendrith. Now, Taylor Pendrith is a guy I mentioned a lot last year. I like Taylor Pendrith, nice young guy who I think is gonna break through at some point. So I'm gonna ride the hype while I can. I caught myself there. And then coming in, and then now this is where I am in line, because he's number 5 overall. I am in line with my overall rankings at this point. Ryan Moore falls at number 4 for me here. Yeah, Ryan Moore falls at number 4 for me. I thought I read it wrong. So this is where we align. You have him a little bit further down. I have him a little higher up, but this is one you can ring the bell on. We are both in agreement. Ryan Moore is a guy that Divots and Pivots believes in this week, and you can play with confidence coming in at number 4 for me. Give me your top 3 as we round out the show.
Russell Henley coming in at number 3, 9,600, which is appropriate. He's won here before, winner back in 2013. And I know some people would say it's 11 years ago. Doesn't matter. All it takes is one moment, one shot. And it comes back to Hideki Matsuyama. He came out at number 2 in my model. And he was bit last year by the injury bug a lot. I made the joke that I wouldn't pick him at all because he rarely makes it through a round, it feels like. Then I'm going to trust the numbers on this one, because if he's healed, went to church on Sunday. If he's healthy, there's very few folks who are better ball strikers. We saw that at Augusta, and we've seen that from time to time. Speaking of ball strikers, Corey Connors seems to be the chalkiest of the chalky this week. But my number 1 was a guy who last year, I think there was some disappointment when he didn't get picked for the Ryder Cup. Mr. Lucas Glover. And Pops. He's number 1. He's number 1 in my model. He's only $7,700. And again, coming off of a finish like he did last year, I'm going to roll the dice with Lucas. My sister went to middle school with him, so I also kind of have that connection that I'm going to throw a bone over that way. Nice. Shout out to Greer, South Carolina. Hey, we almost made it to a show without a camp drop, but I'm not going to talk camp. So Lucas Glover, Hideki Matsuyama, and Russell Henley. That's 1, 2, and 3 to kind of bring us home. What do you got at the top of your list?
Look, it's perfect, because when both of us have someone in the top 3, that is a sure sign that they are going to win. It's just money. They're going to win. Go bet Lucas Glover, because I have him at number 3 right now for all the same reasons you just said. Lucas Glover, I have him at number 3. Number 2, I can't not play one of the hottest golfers in the world right now. We've mentioned him, Ludwig Aberg. I got to play him. I'm never going to get it right. Ludwig, he's my number 2. And then coming up as my number 1, a guy who was very hot last year, who we played a ton and rode while we could, Eric Cole. Eric Cole is the number 1 in my model. So I love that. My only knock, I like everything you said about Hideki, and it might actually cause me to change how I do my process next week. Hideki's putter just comes out like almost dead last for me in this field. And that's one thing that, injury aside, that's the one part of your game that I feel like injury is not going to necessarily affect as much, and his putter is just dreadful at the moment. But I'm going to look at my process to see if maybe I can tweak that, because Hideki, if you're seeing Hideki as high up as you are, and I'm seeing this down low, there's got to be some sort of middle ground, the way I look at it. So we shall see. But that's my top 3: Lucas Glover, Ludwig Aberg, and Eric Cole. Any final thoughts leading into this week, bud?
2 of them. Welcome back, Gary Woodland. He was top 20 in my model, 7,100. But again, when I say welcome back, if you don't know, he had a lesion removed from his brain. So, we're talking about brain surgery, and the guy's coming back. So welcome back, Gary Woodland, this week. And Eric Cole was on my short list because Eric Cole also finished last year PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, and $9,700. That's what kind of shied me away from him. Again, that's the DK points or DK price that might not even come into effect. So I still might snag me some Eric Cole in a snake draft if I see him laying around. I like that call. Last but certainly not least, I really, really, let's go, Akshay, lock it back in. Remember what you did. And I'd love to see him in the winner's circle. And I'd like to see me in the winner's circle. And I'd like to see you outside of the winner's circle cheering me on inside the winner's circle.
We can all dream, bud. That's what we do on this show. We dream, and you dream more than others. Let's get to it. That's going to do it. Episode 2. The season's just getting started. Stick around with us every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock here on the Fantasy Sports Corporation. We are Divots and Pivots. I'm Andrew LeDuc. This is Bud Copeland. Join us every week. Stick around, too, after us right now. Scoreboard Addicts is following us right on, coming up next year on Fantasy Sports Corporation. If you like crazy New York sports fans and whiskey and everything else that you will probably knock you off your chair for the outrageous things they say, that's the show for you. I thoroughly enjoy watching them when we're done. So Scoreboard Addicts right here.
Land the plane.
I am an expert pilot. Peace.